When I say schooling is a mechanism for racial control, does that make you uncomfortable? Saying it makes me cringe a little. Slavery was a mechanism for racial control, right? But what could be more debilitating to a child and to a nation than a child being miseducated? I was born prematurely to a teen mom in the summer of 1973. On the very next day, the other mothers in my hometown filed suit against the local public school district for failing to deliver the promises of Brown versus the Board of Education, 20 years after it was decided for the rest of America. They had to wait until I got here. When I was a girl, 20% of my waking hours were entrusted to schools. The integrated buildings I was bused to were places of refuge and intolerance. I loved school because books were there. I hated schools because I was misunderstood. I wanted something from my teachers that they couldn't give me or didn't know they needed to. I knew that certain labels mattered to my teachers. Shelley has a single mother. My mama was married. My dad lived in a different state. Shelley needs special ed services because when she finally speaks, we don't understand what she's saying. Not Shelley got her mama's Mississippi accent. Shelley's family lives in poverty. Not that we lived with my great-grandparents who were homeowners who had migrated from Mississippi for a better life. When I was a girl, you could not have told me that my experience was abnormal. It was my normal. I loved my family and my neighborhood. I loved that house with the huge vegetable garden and peach trees in the middle of the city where gardens should not grow. I loved Kuntz Park and playing on the big slide and laughing with my sister and cousins on the weekends, and then I'd have to go back to school. Some of my teachers' labels were mislabels. The kid next to Shelley can't speak English well. Not the kid sitting next to her is brilliant because he speaks 2 languages. Her classmates are not reading proficiently. Not that they're that they're functionally literate with everything they want to read, like my aunt's romance novels. I wondered what the other well-meaning white folks in my life, like if they knew my teachers. The caseworkers, the police officers who had shown up a few weekends, the doctors treating my mama's mental illness. My teachers really didn't know what to do with me. I was super smart, but painfully silent, like I did not speak at school. When all hell was breaking loose in my life, I ended up being forced to move from my home to Joy and Burton's home, 2 people who were much more than just well-meaning white folks to me. At school, when I finally did speak, the other black kids thought I was an Oreo. Black on the outside, white on the inside. I didn't fit in with the white kids in my advanced classes either. I chose to walk out with the other black kids at our school's race riot, though, but not without taking Miss Kelly's English test first. I was a bona fide nerd. I started speaking out against racism at about 16 years old through teen racial roundtables and a talk show on the radio. I decided that schools actually could be spaces for racial healing, so I decided to become a teacher. I went to college, moved out on my own, had beautiful babies, and tried not to allow the stigma of being a single mom on welfare to define me. After 9 years, I finished college, got my teaching certificate, I got married, I landed my first teaching job. I was a master teacher. That's what they said anyway. I was a master teacher. I love my students like they were my own. There'd be no achievement gap in my classroom. I wanted to give my students something that I had never gotten. I had 5 children of my own, so the beautiful babies kept coming. I thought juggling motherhood and teaching was really hard, but teaching while black was harder. It was probably like working while black in any other job. Being one of the only, working twice as hard to get half as far. Explaining away black kids failed test taking, explaining why so many black boys were in the in-school suspension room. The other teachers needed to hear from me that pitying black kids, coddling them, and emoting about how inconvenient their problems are for you solved nothing. After I had my last child, RJ, and about 7 years in, I was tired. I left teaching plagued with questions. How could we have created this dire condition in education where this many black kids were at the bottom of every positive school ranking, the worst, and at the very top of most negative school metrics, the best at being bad? What if asking teachers to fix broken kids is a waste of time because the system is functioning precisely as it was designed to fail black kids? In order for you to understand how schooling could be a mechanism for racial control, you must understand how it works. It starts with this socially created lie that black kids are biologically different than other kids. Like the black kid is a monolith and they're all the same. We perpetuate this lie with the reproduction of white culture, and that changes how we perceive kids. So when my son, RJ, who's now 11, walks into his math class, he's perceived a certain way. He won't know what he needs to know, he won't have what he needs to have, and he'll misbehave. RJ is nothing like the black kid. He's a hardcore gamer. He's quiet, proudly weird, and carefree. Remember when you had to do those timed drill math sheets in elementary school? Doing well with something like that RJ could care less about doing well with something like that. And he'd be like, I know the answers, right? Why do I have to rush? Is there a prize? So by the time he's failing his 6th grade math tests, his inferiority is actually confirmed, and they'll keep collecting data about his failure to prove whatever they want to prove about kids like him. By the time his math teacher is calling me, and I still haven't returned the call, by the way, but by the time his math teacher is calling me, he's wanting to know what's going on with RJ. And what I'd like to say to him is, RJ don't care about finding the least common denominator. Can you tell him how math and technology make video game characters careen around a corner in a race car at high speeds without spinning out? That's the kind of stuff he wants to know, but not the kind of talk his teacher wants to have. By the time RJ gets to high school, he will never have been exposed to some of the math that he needs for the ACT. Another legitimized predictor of college readiness. His life options could be limited, especially if his self-efficacy is low and his spirit is wearied. And remember, it's based on this socially created lie that we just keep retelling about black kids. But instead of calling it a lie, we try to address the symptoms and the supposed bad actors. We try to assume that his struggles are the sum of his experiences and his lack of effort, and that his parents and his teachers aren't doing enough either. The white architects of schooling have controlled the outcomes of countless students for a lot of years. Instead of patching up individual folks, let's fix the system that keeps reproducing them over and over. How do we implement an anti-racist education equation? We start by mobilizing a critical mass of influencers, youth, parents, teachers, community members, business stakeholders, policymakers, funders, you, me, that's all of us. Our mobilization has to start with our conversations. We must together use our influence to defy the lie about the inferiority of Black kids. We need to continue mobilizing until we see the kind of change that results in anti-racist decision-making in our schools. Our conversation must convert to collective action. We need to make sure that we're focused more on assets than on assumptions, more on systems than on symptoms, less on training and more on transformation. We must plan, implement, and stay the course. We will pass through failure on our way to success. We won't give up because the gaps don't close overnight. They were not created overnight. We'll press forward until we see the kind of change that results in schooling where race is no longer a predictor of educational outcomes. Students, forgive us for paying more attention to your labels than your lived experiences. Teachers, forgive us for not seeing you as solutions and not supporting you well. You who are not teachers, you are influencers right where you are. The other place racialization happens is on your job and in your own homes. So where will you start? I'll start with my babies. I'm telling them to be their Black nerdy selves and to deploy their smarts and their swagger at their leisure. I'm telling them that they can take a job or make a job doing whatever they dream of. Most of my kids are quiet like I was when I was a girl. I want to unlock their voices. I want to unlock your voice. What conversation will you have first? Push past any discomfort you have and do it. But remember, dialogue is not action. Dialogue prepares us for the kind of action that creates lasting change together. Thank you.